From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health. And now here is our host and producer, Hilda Labrada Gore.
Hey, Hilda here. What if the root of all sickness has to do with conflict or trauma? What if disease has to do with the psyche-brain-organ connection? This is episode 511, and our guest today is Dr. Melissa Sell. Melissa is a chiropractor and an expert on Germanic New Medicine. Today, Melissa gives us an overview of what German New Medicine consists of. It's a dramatically different approach to healing based on the work of Dr. Hammer. Melissa reviews the 5 biological laws of the German New Medicine method and philosophy. She explains how there is often a root event that leads to the body's adaptation and later healing and resolution. That said, while the body's immediate response to conflict or trauma is protective, it can sometimes lead to long-term issues. So Melissa tells us today her own story of how German New Medicine helped her heal from issues related to acne, and why she wishes more people understood that every conflict and problem in life has its purpose, in part to teach and grow us. Before we get into the conversation, I want to let you know about a podcast. It's the Gubba Homestead podcast. If you're looking to connect with the land, and if you want to live more like our ancestors, then you'll love the Gubba Homestead podcast. From fermenting foods and making sourdough, to raising chickens and storing seeds, Gubba brings self-reliance to life with authenticity and humor. Whether you're farming acres of land or dreaming of starting small, Gubba's practical tips are perfect for anyone ready to take the leap. So join the movement toward a simpler, more natural life. Tune in to the Gubba Homestead podcast on your favorite podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, boost of inspiration you didn't even know you needed. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Melissa.
Hi, Hilda. Thanks for having me.
Our audience really wants to know more about German New Medicine. So let's start with a story of someone on their healing journey, maybe a client of yours or someone you've encountered who kind of tried all the routes, conventional and alternative medicine for healing, but found out at the end of the day that their illness was related to trauma.
Yes, I've got a wonderful story of a woman in her mid-40s who is dealing with very terrible psoriasis all over her chest and her stomach. And so this is a scaly, uncomfortable, thick, itchy rash where you are just kind of constantly dealing with either flakes or inflammation. And, she tried all of the things. She was seeing a very popular Instagram naturopath. She was doing a sauna and grounding and getting sunlight on it, nutrition, supplements, taking ginger, lymph massage, skin brushing, black seed oil. She even went as far as to do Humira. So she was like, okay, let's do all the natural things. Let me even try just to get some relief from this endless uncomfortable skin situation. And we had to talk about. So, that's what we'll talk about today is what happened. So something had to have happened in her experience, in her life that caused her tissues to adapt in this particular way. And so the outer skin is associated with a separation conflict. So we needed to identify who were you feeling separated from? Who did you want to hold close to you that you couldn't hold close to you? What was going on? Was there someone you wanted to separate from? And so we pinpointed the date when her divorce was finalized. So this was a good thing. She was happy to have a divorce. However, the divorce meant that her child was going to have to separate from her to visit the father. And so this became her big conflict. And so even though she's doing all of the right things, lifestyle-wise, nutrition-wise, this conflict in her psyche, in her soul, that periodically her child would have to leave her, right? So even looking at the location of the psoriasis was like, in between her breasts, on her chest and stomach, where you hold your child. And so she felt that she was allowing her child to leave her, to go to this emotionally unsupportive person. She's afraid the child's going to be traumatized every single time there's a separation, every time there was a phone call about it, every time there was a court case about it. She was stepping on the track of her separation conflict. And so through really she had to go inside and she had to look at, so this is one of those situations, and we'll talk about the various options. So ideally we want a practical resolution. So the practical resolution would be your child gets to stay with you all the time. He never has to leave and go to be with someone else, but given the legal situation and it's the father, so the child had to go, so this is a situation. She had to work it out inside. She had to become less resistant to this. She had to shift her perspective, shift her every time she thought about the situation, instead of cringing and being resistant and angry and upset about it, she had to do something different. And so we worked through a lot of different internal strategies, and she, through awareness, through watching her thoughts, watching her reactions, realizing that if I keep doing this, I'm going to keep getting this outcome. She shifted things inside, resolved her conflict, and had incredible changes. I mean, almost 99% of the skin situation completely resolved. There were still, tiny little tracks around it, but the majority of this conflict for her, it was after she made the connection and then she had to change something. And this is what the core of this is. You have to see what the conflict is about. And if it's ongoing, if these symptoms are chronic, there's something chronically going on about this conflict for you. And you have to identify what it is and find a solution. And so she did that and was able to clear her skin after trying everything else.
Wow. And so is that the crux of Germanic New Medicine, that the sickness or disease or illness, whatever is presenting, has its roots in some trauma, some conflict within you? Is that right?
Yes. So there's a conflict experience, something that is acute, it's dramatic, it catches you off guard, you feel totally alone in this problem, and that initiates an adaptation within the body. So the skin, so we have to think about, what does the skin do? The skin interfaces. This is where we have touch, and it's a form of communication to be skin to skin with someone. And when you are torn from that person, when you're separated, the biological program is to numb that area. And so when you are actively in this conflict, there's loss of tissue, there's numbing of the tissue, and also memory loss. So separation conflicts are also seen when someone has memory loss. We have to look at the separation conflicts in their life. And so the body, really the crux is that the body is doing something on purpose to assist you in dealing with this conflicted event in your life. So the separation, the body, so it's helping you. And that's the big thing, is it's meaningful and it's purposeful. It's not a error. It's not, you ate something bad and now your body's inflamed, or you got, it's that the body is doing something very intentional to help you to cope, to deal with the loss of your child, the separation from your child, whatever your conflict happens to be.
Our body is on our side, basically. I love that so much, because I've interviewed so many experts, and my own experience leads me to understand that our body is actually always in the healing process. It's trying to recalibrate when it suffers traumas of various kinds, right? It's never against you. The whole idea of, for example, an autoimmune condition, the concept is that your body is attacking itself, but your body would never do that. It's actually responding in a way that promotes healing. We just think of it as against us somehow, I guess.
That's how, yes, everything is misinterpreted in the conventional world. We look at a symptom and we say, aha, this is a problem, when really it's the solution. By the time the inflammation arrives, by the time bacteria are active at a site of your body, it means you went through the conflict, you resolved it, and now the tissue is in the repair phase. And so we need this change everything, the language that we use, the way that we perceive symptoms. Instead of, when I'm itchy and inflamed, instead of saying, oh gosh, I have a problem right now, we say, oh gosh, I had a problem, I had a conflict that I recently resolved. And so now you're looking for, what did I just resolve? What did I just chill out about? What just changed? And now this symptom tells me my body's in the repair mode.
Yes. Okay. So I know there's a lot to this, Melissa, but I actually want you to help us unpack the 5 biological laws that will help us probably understand this whole different approach to healing from Germanic New Medicine?
Certainly. So the first law is the psyche-brain organ connection. So this is the event that sets off the adaptation cascade. Dr. Hammer labeled this a DHS. This is in honor of his son, Dirk Hammer syndrome. This is the conflicting event. So this is the thing that you were not expecting. This isn't just general stress. I have to stress the point that this is not just general daily stress. This is a specific event, a specific moment in time where you were not expecting this. This was a highly acute situation. It was dramatic. It caught you off guard. You weren't prepared for it. And boom, then your psyche perceived there is a threat to our survival. So basically, a survival threat has arisen and the psyche perceives it. There's an impact in the brain, and then the organ begins to adapt. The adaptations in the organ depend on what type of tissue it is. And what type of tissue gets activated depends on the nature of the conflict. And so basically there's 4 different categories of conflicts that correlate to the 4 different tissue germ layers of our body. So Dr. Hammer, he takes this back to embryology, back to when the 2 cells came together to make what would become your body. There was this differentiation process that happened. These tissues were morphing and changing into all of the different layers that built this beautiful, amazing, functional, living, breathing organism. And so if the conflict that you experienced was about basic survival, so if it was about food, if it was about breathing, if it was about basic reproduction, if it was about securing energy, right? We need to secure energy in order to survive. These are the morsel types of conflicts. When you're in the active conflict, this is the yellow group. If you ever look at the GNM chart, the yellow tissues, they grow during the conflict. This is the glandular tissue of the body. So, for example, the thyroid gland, the parotid gland, the tonsils, these are glandular tissues that produce juices. And these juices help us somewhere in the metabolic process of acquiring food and then breaking that food down. So if you have a conflict about acquiring a morsel, like I want this morsel, classic, the child, I want the cookie, I don't want the broccoli. So I want this morsel of food, I don't want that morsel. If this is a shocking event that catches the child off guard, they were unprepared, they thought they were guaranteed to get that cookie and they were given the broccoli instead, and they said, no, this is a conflict for me. I do not want this. What happens is the brain turns on a program to proliferate the tonsils. So the tonsils they grow bigger during the conflict so that they can produce more salivary juices, more digestive juices, so that we can better either get the morsel in or spit the morsel out. The right side is about getting the morsel, the left side is about getting rid of it. And so the tonsils will grow, they will proliferate when we're having some type of morsel conflict. And then when we resolve the conflict, when we get over it, when we are not, actively dealing with it, or we successfully get the morsel or get rid of the morsel, then the body breaks down that extra tissue. So it builds up during the conflict. This is called the conflict active phase. This is a description of the second biological law, because every biological program operates in 2 phases. So the first phase, this is I'm in the conflict. I want the cookie. I don't want the broccoli. I want to swallow this thing. I'm in a conflict that's causing the tissue of the tonsils to proliferate. They're getting bigger, 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 until we resolve the conflict. And oh, what a relief. Grandma gave me the cookie. I got the thing that I wanted. And now the tonsils, we don't need that extra tissue anymore.
Yeah.
So the biology activates the healing phase. And during the healing phase, what was built up during the conflict is now decomposed. And the body, this is the 4th biological law, uses bacteria. So bacteria in the body, you need to think of them as microsurgeons. They are helpers. They are your own tissue. They are derived within each germ layer. Within each tissue layer, you have these workers that assist you during the healing phase. So when there's pus on the tonsils, right? If there's white patches, what do we know? We know there was a morsel conflict, or there was a morsel I wanted to get if it's the right side, something I wanted to get rid of if it's the left side. And if there's white patches, that means we've resolved the conflict. the morsel conflict has been finished, and now the body is decomposing, breaking down that tissue. Now, that will happen. We will have swelling. It will be hard to swallow, right? Because there's fluid in that area, inflammation because the body is in this repair phase. It will get to a point of maximum swelling, maximum vagotonia, and then there will be a big squeeze. And so you'll have, in this thing, they call it tonsillar like angina. It's pain. You'll feel the squeeze, and then we'll squeeze out the fluid from the tissue, also from the brain. And so during the healing phase, we also have brain involvement. So that's when we have pressure in the head, a headache. The big squeeze happens, the epicrisis, it's a surge of sympathetic dominance to squeeze the fluid out. And then we go into the second phase of healing, which is the continued scarification, whatever tissue needs to be continued to be repaired during that time. And then the program is over. That's the second biological law. So just know, every biological program, there's the conflict phase. This is when you are thinking about the conflict constantly. This is when your hands and feet are cold, you're not hungry, you're waking up in the middle of the night with the problem on your mind. The conflict is active. And then when you resolve it, you breathe a sigh of relief. Oh, the money came through. I got the message that, my grandma is going to be okay. Everything's okay. We move into the healing phase. That's when we're feverish and tired and the body is repairing and we're inflamed. We have a headache. That's the healing phase. Then we have the big squeeze, and then we have the second phase of healing. And so we have to recognize each phase so that we know, oh, I'm in a conflict right now. Oh, I'm in a healing phase right now. Oh, I just had an epicrisis. And so this helps you to identify where you are in the program. Other three categories of conflict. So we have the morsel conflict.
Before we jump there, I just want to wrap my head around all this because this is a lot of information for some of us and this is new. So actually, I can see that a lot of us in our regular day-to-day lives as adults will have these experiences of, like you said, the conflict, the pain, when it's kind of keeping us awake, the inflammation, and then the resolution and all these things. I can see that happening even on a psychological level, if not a physical level, right? But just to be clear, when you were bringing up the tonsils, that was an example of what'd you call it, a morsel situation when it has to do with something that you want or something you want to reject, and you had this conflict. And this could have been 10, 20 years ago. It could have been when you were a child. It could have been when you were maybe even in utero. Is that right? Am I tracking?
Well, we want to look at when the symptoms arise, that's around when the conflict happened or when the conflict was reactivated. So you could have, if you have had ongoing tonsil issues your whole life, the big conflict could have happened when you were 4. And then ever since then, there are tracks. There are certain things that remind us of the conflict. But a person who's 40 and has tonsil issues, we know that something happened to activate the conflict at 40. So there was a track that was reactivated or a conflict. And so we do want to look at when the symptoms come up, what happened around that time. Like something had to have occurred that either reactivated a conflict or started a new conflict at that point.
Oh my gosh, this is so fascinating. It's so profound. And we've only touched on 2 of the biological laws. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I just want to interject here for a second. So the thing is, like, don't people get sick because of also like toxins? Like, let's say someone's always having trouble with headaches, and you might think, okay, there's some conflict or something that they had and it triggered maybe when they were 5 years old, when actually there's mold in their attic, right? So how is that related to German New Medicine, or is it is that a separate category?
So there are 3 exceptions to the biological program. So the biological programs they're organic, like they come from the inside out. So if there's a lump in your breast or there's a lump on your skin, that came from the inside, so there's some program that's happening inside of the body. There are things that can come from the outside. The outside things, the mechanical things are like an injury. So an injury isn't a biological program. It still follows, it has to go through healing phases after the injury, but there's not a conflict that initiates it necessarily. I actually believe that everything that happens, injuries included, are initiated by something going on within, and it's, kind of an externalization, but it's not a biological program from the GNM perspective. Mm-hmm. So there's injury. There's also poisoning. So if there's a poison, something poisonous coming from the outside that is interfering with normal biological functions, that's a poisoning. And so that isn't going to have it's not a biological program. There's not going to be an impact in the brain. The big thing, kind of when the conversation comes up up, is it toxins? Is it a biological program? There is a way that we'd be able to know definitively which it is, and that's with a brain scan, because that's one of the things Dr. Hammer discovered, is that for all of these biological programs, every single time there's a conflict and there is an organ adaptation, there's also an impact in the brain in a specific region. So each brain layer, Dr. Hammer found every single time, if someone had a liver cancer or pancreatic cancer or something in their lung, they would also have an impact in a specific zone of their brain every single time. And so psyche, brain, organ. And so if the symptom a person is experiencing, if it's due truly to a poison, there wouldn't be that impact in the brain. And so that way, if we did a CT scan of the brain and saw this person is exhibiting all of these symptoms, they don't have the impact in the brain, then we could conclude this is a poisoning situation. There's poison that the body is trying to eliminate. So my approach, if a person, not everyone realistically is going to go get a CT scan and try to determine this, I say do both. Clean up your environment, get out of the mold, clean up your diet, clean up the products that you're using, detox if that makes sense to you. Avoid detoxing when your body's in a healing phase, because it's just metabolically expensive to detox. And when your body is trying to rebuild tissue, you don't want to be putting that extra pressure on the body to have to detox while you're in a healing phase. But if some type of cleanse or detox or nutritional protocol makes sense to you, I say do it all, and so that's where let's look at the biological program. So if it's a headache, and you're like, oh, well, I think it's the mold. Well, let's also look at the conflicts in your life. Let's also address, anything that could be conflicted that you might be in a healing phase from, in addition to getting out of the moldy environment, cleaning up the mold. So I say do both, but there is a way to tell for sure, is it toxins? Is it a biological program?
Yeah, and I think most of us probably err on the side of addressing the physical symptom or the physical situation. So if I were living in that home with the mold in the attic, I'd be like, okay, I got rid of that, or I moved, all is well. But why not dive deeper and see, is there something in me that maybe even, and this is maybe getting too far afield, but what if there's something in me that was actually attracting that situation for some reason, right? There's some trauma that I either think I have to punish myself over, or there's something that I haven't identified, spiritual or emotional level, that is causing me to find myself repeatedly in situations like that. Like, I have several friends who have been sick for a very long time, and they keep kind of tripping over new rocks. If it's not heavy metal toxicity, it's, EMF sensitivity or Lyme's, and it's like one thing after another. And I'm like, how much bad luck can one person have? It's clearly things are poisoning them in their environment, because I do believe that, a tick could convey some kind of disease, or there could be well water that's got bacteria that didn't sit well with you and kind of compromised your immune system. But at the same time, it's like something else is happening. And I guess that's what German New Medicine is trying to point to.
Yes. And it is, even the things like, was it really the bacteria, or was you went through a resolution that you had so we have to, I'd say, like I said, look at both of those things. I think what you're saying is absolutely true, that we attract the situations that we need, and they're trying to show us something. Because yes, how many people have got out of the frying pan and into the fire? We get out of the moldy situation, we move somewhere else, there's a ton of problems. It's like, why do problems seem to characterize my experience? And so, I am very curious in those subtle things that cause us to end up in certain relationships again and again, so that these are these unconscious patterns. And so unconscious patterns are very fascinating to look at, and how they show up in the situations I find myself in again and again and again. So I do take my work there with people, because it's like, okay, so why this and this and this and this and all of these things? It's here to show you something. And that's how, I really use the map of GNM. Every conflict is here to show you something. Every biological conflict, every relationship conflict, it's here to teach you, it's here to grow you, it's here so that you can evolve and move past it. We don't really want a life where there's no challenges, where there's no conflicts, where nothing ever happens. We would be bored to death. And so, recognizing that there is a value to everything that doesn't go your way, to every conflicting event, every problem can be a stepping stone, right? To elevate your life experience, give it texture, give you, the personality quirks. This is another cool thing Dr. Hammer discovered is, all of the things that make an artist, an author who can just write all these books. It's the combination of their traumas. It activates different constellations in the brain. And these are incredible gifts. So even, people who are autistic. It's like, but they can do incredible things with math and they can build. It's just, they have these gifts that they turn on because of the conflict. The conflict turns on these gifts. And so if you can, sort through the things going on in my life and say, what's the gift here? What's the nugget? What's the gold? How am I going to grow from this? Even just that attitude, instead of, oh, I'm the victim of all these terrible things happening to me, like being in that victim mindset is one of the hugest problems of, and that's why the externalization, I'm looking at the mold and the germ and the tick, and we are looking at these outside things. It's the things outside of me that are making me sick. It's disempowering. When you say there's something in me that's attracting all of this, you take the power back.
Oh my gosh, that's really powerful. Thank you so much for saying that. And it's a reminder to all of us wherever we are on our health journey. So let's back up and review some of the other biological laws that we didn't get to yet.
Yeah, totally. So the first one is the conflict, the thing that sets off the DHS. The second one was the law of two phases. So we have the conflict phase and the healing phase. And then the third law is the organization of the different tissues. So I touched on this a little already. We have the yellow group. That's the endoderm, that's control from the brainstem. That's the old morsel conflicts. Then we have the orange group. The orange is divided into two. We have the old mesoderm and the new mesoderm. The old mesoderm is controlled from the cerebellum, and it behaves similarly to the yellow tissue in that it grows during the active conflict. The organs are the deep skin, so the dermis skin, the pleura, the pericardium. So these are these thick coatings. And what the conflict is for this theme is attack and protection. So if I am feeling attacked, if I'm feeling soiled, if I'm feeling defiled, disfigured, this tissue will thicken. It will create a shield. So a melanoma, for example, is a shield built by the body because at that location, you felt attacked or soiled or dirtied or disfigured at that spot. And so you have to identify, when did I feel that? What happened that I felt attacked? I felt like someone was stabbing me in the back, talking about me behind my back, that there was, someone was yelling at me and spitting in my face. That can show up as acne. So acne was one of my huge insights to really making sense and understanding GNM in this map, because my acne journey was just, I went through from all the way conventional, all the way holistic, and then we went to GNM and everything made sense. So I thought that at first that it's bacteria, the conventional idea that it's bacteria, you need to really wash your face. And so I would wash and scrub my face. I would use antibacterial soap. I would use rubbing alcohol just to kill every little bacteria, because that's what I thought was of my acne when I was a teenager. Would get that stuff that would bleach the pillowcases because I just thought that if I just kill everything on my skin, then I will have clear skin. Wow. Obviously that did not work. I tried to clear my skin with all of the topical things. Then I learned about nutrition. And then I read this book at the chiropractic office I worked at right out of high school. There was this book called Milk, the Deadly Poison. I was like, oh, it's dairy. If I cut dairy out, then my skin will clear up.
Coming up, Melissa explains all of the other shifts she made to try to heal her skin, including tweaking her diet, until she came across a German New Medicine map that gave her new understanding and relief from her acne.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Rosita cod liver oil. Discover raw, natural nutrition with Rosita's 100% Norwegian extra virgin cod liver oil. At Rosita, they do things differently. As a small family company, they line catch their own wild cod from the pristine Norwegian fjords, and they ensure that every drop of oil is completely unadulterated and raw. The oil is gently released within minutes without processing, preserving its natural integrity. And it's naturally filtered without heat or chemicals to meet stringent EU standards for potency and purity. This all means that Rosita cod liver oil retains its naturally occurring vitamins A and D, along with a full spectrum of omega fatty acids, including omega-3, EPA, and DHA. And unlike other cod liver oils, they never try to fortify with synthetic vitamins A and D. What you get is raw, unadulterated cod liver oil, just as nature intended. Rosita's cod liver oil, it comes in 2 convenient forms: liquid for economical dosing for the whole family, or soft gels for easy on-the-go supplementation. It's also GAPS, WAPF, and RCP approved. So feel the difference with Rosita. Visit rositausa.com. That's Rosita, ROSITA, USA.com, and use the code WISE10 for 10% off your order today. Again, that's rositausa.com and the code WISE10 for 10% off. And One Earth Health. Explore the amazing benefits of organ meats with One Earth Health. Did you know that organ meats from New Zealand are 400% more packed with nutrients compared to those from other countries? That means you get a lot more of vitamins A, K, and the B complex, plus other high-quality nutrients. At One Earth Health, they put these nutrients into easy-to-take capsules. Their cows are raised in pastures without GMOs or pesticides, and what's special about their capsules? Well, they are filler-free. Just pure 100% organ meat. And their prices are the best for organs from New Zealand. You can purchase their popular beef organ supplement for just $39.99. And it comes with 200 capsules. So boost your nutrition with One Earth Health now. Visit their website, oneearthhealth.com/wisetraditions for a special sign-up page that gives you a 15% discount. Again, that's oneearthhealth.com/wisetraditions. And you'll get that special sign-up page that gives you a 15% discount. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions.
And every time I changed something, the skin would clear up for a minute. I'd still have the food cut out of my diet and it would return. And so it was like, okay, so maybe it's not the dairy. And then I did the 80-10-10 diet for a month, which is where you just eat all raw fruits and vegetables. And so I ate all raw fruits and vegetables and I was like, this is it. I will have clear skin at the end of these 30 days. Once again, it failed me. It did not work. Then I went to more of like a paleo type diet and I was like, aha, this will be it. Then I got into gut. I was like, oh, it's the gut health. And so if I eat the sauerkraut and I take the probiotics, that will be it. And it would work for a little bit. And then I'd be eating my probiotics, eating my sauerkraut, and I would still get a breakout. And then I thought if I eat out at a restaurant, it's the bad oils, it's the inflammatory oils, and I'd never have them at home, but if I, happened to be eating out, I would always get a breakout. And so I couldn't figure it out until I learned this map. And so the conflict of acne is feeling attacked or feeling soiled. And so I noticed that for me as I learned all this stuff about nutrition. And so if I ever ate something that didn't align with my, my beliefs and what I taught about nutrition, I would get a breakout. If I, had Chipotle, even if I, it's like, oh, well, they use bad oils, I would have acne. And so that was my conflict, was feeling soiled, feeling dirtied by the foods that I was eating, causing the acne breakout. Or if my dog would lick my face, I would always get a breakout if my dog licked my face because I had this, this old association of, oh, dog, slobber, bacteria on my skin, I would get a breakout. But with my awareness and with changing my associations, my dogs can lick my face, my cows can lick my face. I can occasionally eat places that I know they're not using good oils, but because I'm no longer creating this feeling of, ooh, ick, I shouldn't eat this. This is soiling. This is bad for me. Having the mindset of, I don't eat this most of the time, but this is not a problem. My body can process it easily. No breakouts anymore. And so it is. And anytime I do get pimple or a blemish here or there, I know exactly what caused it. Like the duck water, I've got these ducks that I will pour the water and sometimes it'll splash and splash up. I was like, ooh, and if I have a little moment of, oh, gross, I got poopy duck water on my face, I could have a breakout right at that spot because of the association of, oh, gross, cringe, I got something yucky on my skin.
What you're saying really resonates with me because I have a friend who was struggling with eczema, another skin breakout situation. And she thought it had to do with eating gluten or something, and she did all these different things. And then she realized, oh, it has to do more with something inside me than from what I'm eating. It has to do with some trauma, I suppose. I don't think she was going the Germanic New Medicine route, but the point I'm trying to make is when she was able to release that feeling of conflict or concern or association, even that this is making this happen, when she made peace with herself, actually, Melissa, she was able to eat things to her heart's content and not have the same response anymore. So there really is something to this, I think.
Totally. Yeah. So eczema would be a separation conflict. And when you resolve the separation conflict, because it's not the food, and that's one of my mantras, is it's not the food, it's you. The food. And so that's what happens is foods can cause symptoms in the sense that the food reminds your biology of the conflict. And so if you were eating Cheerios and your parents got in a huge fight that ended in their divorce, right? The brain can tag the milk from the cereal, tag the gluten, the grain. And so every time you eat it, if you have terrible indigestion or your stomach gurgles and you have to run off to the bathroom, it's because something indigestible happened while that food was in your system. And so every time you eat it, you say, oh, I'm gluten intolerant, I'm dairy intolerant, I can't eat these foods. The foods are bad for me or they're inflammatory. It's not the food, it's the association in your psyche to the indigestible situation. Or if it's your skin, that means that food, or it can be anything. It can be a person, it can be a place, it can be music, it can be detergent, it can be a smell, gets flagged by the brain. And we have to think about this in our survival strategy. So the brain remembers everything. And if you were a little animal down at a water hole, you're about to take a sip of water and there's a big juniper bush next to you, and then a predator, leaps out of the bush at you, and you have a conflict in that moment. Oh my goodness, I might die. You have to get away. The next time you smell juniper, don't you think that your biology is going to activate the biological program that's going to help you to get out of that situation, help you to get more oxygen in your blood, more, blood to your muscles, more energy so you can get away from this predator just when it smells juniper? That's a survival strategy. That's how allergies work. That's how intolerance is. When you react to a food, it's your supercomputer saying, we were here before, this was dangerous, this is a warning sign, and it turns on the program. And so when you can identify what the program is, what happened to me, why was I in danger, why was this a threat? And when your psyche realizes, oh, that's not a threat anymore. There was a story of a child, brother and sister, I think, that they were stealing nuts from the tree of the neighbor. So they were, just little kids walking, and they're like, oh, let's have some nuts from the neighbor's tree. And then the neighbor comes out and, yells at them, and they get in big trouble for stealing these nuts. Okay, we're allergic to nuts now because we had a very traumatic situation where a scary neighbor is yelling at us for stealing the nuts from their tree. And so allergic to nuts. I can't, go ahead.
Let's use that example. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm thinking, what's interesting to me, and I guess it has to do with our psyche too, is let's say it's two kids, a boy and a girl. The boy might be allergic to nuts, or suddenly an allergic response comes as a result of that interaction. And that might not happen to the girl. That's where I'm like, okay, so it's not as easy as connecting a conflict with a resulting symptom, because the symptom doesn't always appear the same for every person.
Exactly. And that is the uniqueness of the individual. So a situation can happen, an objective situation, a shared external experience, but the internal experience is going to depend on that unique child, what they've been through, their previous experiences is going to determine how they perceive that event, which is so cool, because the same thing can happen, but how this really takes into account, in a way that no other health model does, the uniqueness of the individual, the uniqueness of their experiences and what they've been through, their, vulnerabilities. And so if one child is like, oh yeah, I know old neighbor Joe, he's just, big blowhard. And the other one's like, oh, I've never been confronted like this before. It could be a conflict for one, not a conflict for the other, even just their personalities and how they perceive things. And so what may be a conflict for one person may not be a conflict at all for another. Also, just that state of a person. So let's say that there is an infidelity, so an infidelity in a relationship. And so if that woman, if she was hoping to have children with this man and he, is unfaithful to her, she might develop a cervical adaptation or cervical cancer. But if she has already had her children, and so she wasn't, she's not planning to have children with him, she's already had children with him, she might see this as a threat to her nest, right? A threat to her home, a threat to her money. If she was planning on breaking up with the guy, she'd say, oh, this is, it would be a really, depending on what state is she in with relationship to the man who was unfaithful, so how it's going to hit her is not the same for every single person. It's going to depend on what stage of life are you in, what is your dynamic in the relationship. It's like everything matters in as far as why is it a conflict for one person and not another.
The other thing that comes to my mind, Melissa, is that I think we have hidden conflicts. In other words, there might be a person who says, I know neighbor Joe, he's a blowhard, but on the inside, he's still terrified of neighbor Joe. So this is what I think we have to actually do some work to get to the grain of the issue, even if there's no apparent symptom immediately, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, how did it strike you? Was it scary for you? Was it overwhelming? Did it catch you off guard? And so everything can be learned from. And that's why it's very helpful when everyone knows this map and we can take inventory. You can talk to your children. Anyone have any conflicts today? Any little things that caught you off? Because when you talk about it, that's the beautiful thing when you break out of the isolation. So conflicts, again, they're highly acute, they're dramatic, they catch you off guard, and you feel totally alone in it. Right? You feel like I am alone in the universe dealing with this problem. It's just me and my biology. So my biology has to adapt to help me. But when you can talk to your mother about it, when she is there for you, that's why when children are sent off to school and, sent to kindergarten, your mother's not there to comfort you. Your mother's not there to tell all your problems to. And so you have to kind of, you're all alone in it. And so it's having someone to talk to. And so when families have this map and they understand, the sooner we talk about stuff, the sooner we clear it up, the sooner we bring awareness to it, the sooner that we can laugh about it, right? If we can laugh about the thing that happened, a little girl, she was at school and she was coloring and the girl next to her vomited very close to her shoes, very close to her. And she, she started developing hives after this event. And so she had these hives all over her body. And so the mother noticed that this was happening. And every time she would color, she was coloring and the hives would come up because she was coloring when the vomit happened. And so she talked to her about it. This was took place she messaged me on Instagram and we were chatting about it. And I was like, okay, so she had an association between the vomiting. And so she talked to her about it. I was like, how did she feel in that moment? She said, I just wanted to get away from it. Here's the separation. She wanted to separate from the girl who was vomiting. So that's what a hive is, separation conflict once again. Yes. She wanted to separate. And so it's like, okay, so how do we help her? How do we help her to resolve this? Well, when we talk about it, it makes a lot of sense that your body really wanted to separate from the vomit. That was gross. And your mind associated that with the coloring. And I said, okay, well, have her draw a picture of the situation, right? How funny is it to draw a picture of someone vomiting? Even just the idea of coloring, it's funny, right? Yeah. Can we something funny with it? Can we process it? And so she did that with her and had her color, draw a picture of the vomit, and she resolved the conflict this way. She resolved it through talking to mom, drawing a funny picture and making it light, right? So instead of it being, oh, I didn't know what to do. I was, this was a shocking situation and she vomited and so now it kind of got stuck with me. Now it's light as a feather. Now it's not conflictive. Now we can bring lightness and funniness to it.
That reminds me of neuro-linguistic programming. A friend of mine has studied with Dr. Richard Bandler, and he talks about, I believe, taking conflicts or issues. Let's say someone's annoying you and your family, let's go with Uncle Joe, the neighbor again, but anyway, they're annoying you, and to make it smaller in your mind, perhaps to help you ease the conflict, you almost give them like a Donald Duck voice or put them in a Donald Duck costume. Speakers will sometimes imagine all the audience in their underwear, something to kind of lighten it up for them. So I hear that kind of technique in this drawing illustration.
Totally. Dr. Hammer said that if someone gives you a scary diagnosis, you should imagine them on the toilet because you see that they're just human, because that people often when they're given a diagnosis from someone in a white coat, you see them in this very austere professional, oh, this is the expert telling me that I have a scary disease. Imagine them on the toilet because that automatically demotes them in your mind as you're just a human. What do you know, and you're just a human who doesn't even understand how the body works, so that is the thing for a person who's been given a scary diagnosis, because they hold that moment, right? That moment of shock where the doctor told me, I have bad news for you. Boom, right? It's heavy. It's not light as a feather. Like there, in that moment, we have that stone in our soul, and the conflict is resolved when either it can't happen again or when we can laugh about it, make light of it, give it a Donald Duck voice, give it something funny, see them on the toilet, like something to break the spell of how serious it was in your mind in that moment.
Yeah, interesting. Oh my gosh, Melissa, we're starting to run out of time, but I feel like there are a couple more biological laws we didn't get to, a couple other colors on the chart.
Yeah, so the other colors on the chart, we did the yellow, half the orange. The other half of the orange is the connective tissue. So this is controlled from the cerebral medulla, and this is all of the tissues in the body that give us structure and value. And the conflict here is about abilities. It's about not being capable, having a loss of your value. So a devaluation is self-esteem, right? I don't feel strong enough, smart enough, fast enough, able. I don't have a grip on this, right? I don't feel like I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I've lost my value in some way. And so this causes connective tissue problems. So bones, and this was very interesting for me in particular because of my background in chiropractic, so people who come in with chronic neck pain and shoulder pain and back pain, we would adjust and do all these things. I would have them change their diet. Because my practice prior to learning Genome was all lifestyle based. Let's clean up all of the nutrition, clean up the toxins, let's, align the spine and do these exercises. And it would, and all of those things are very beneficial. So lifestyle changes are super duper helpful for you as a being, right? Because it's better to get enough sleep and be out in the sunshine and eating pure foods and drinking pure water and living as close to nature as possible. So all of that is extremely beneficial, but I was missing the piece of the self-devaluation conflict. And so a person would go through the protocol and they clean up everything over a course of, 3-4 months of just like, oh, I've done all these things. And then we'd have a flare up of the neck pain and it'd be like, well, you're doing your exercises and you're not eating inflammatory foods and you've cleaned up all of your toxic products. And it's just like, I wonder, maybe you slept funny. That was what I had to just chalk it up to because I was missing this piece. And this piece is, how are you intellectually devaluing yourself or having a sense of injustice, right? What's going on in your life? I remember a woman who just had a terrible frozen shoulder situation. And again, she was doing all the healthy things, but I was missing the piece to say, what's going on in your relationships? It was her dominant side. Your dominant side hand is associated with your partner. And so if you are having an issue in that shoulder, we have to look, what's going on in the relationship? How are you feeling devalued? How are you feeling guilty or ashamed, or what's going on there? And so that is the category of self-devaluation. We have to find a way to resolve this conflict, because when this conflict is active, there's loss of tissue. So your bones break down. So this is osteoporosis, osteopenia. When you're losing bone, it's because you're devaluing yourself. And so this often they associate this with menopause and they say, oh, a decrease in estrogen causes a decrease in bone density. No, it happens to be around that time in life, women have a concept of aging. They have a concept of moving into menopause. They feel like they have lost their value. They feel less, I'm not fertile anymore. And they have all sorts of ideas about what that means. We live in a society that is very focused on youth and beauty. And if they have they start to devalue themselves. So it's not about the estrogen. It's about the concept they have of aging, which causes loss of bones. We have to revalue ourselves, because what happens when you resolve this type of conflict, after the resolution, the bones become stronger than before. The lymph nodes become bigger and thicker and better than before after you resolve it. So that's this category. And then the last one, the fourth one, is the red group. We've mentioned this several times already with the outer skin. So the dermis is the underskin that's feeling attacked or soiled. The outer skin is about separation. This is also the lining of the duct, the bile duct, the lining of the gallbladder. This is the areas that have to do with territory and also sexual conflicts. So territory conflicts, sexual conflicts, and separation, things that have to do with the hierarchy in the community. And so these ones, there's loss of tissue during the active conflict followed by tissue restoration. And so this just lets us know the third biological law helps us to understand the map. What does this tissue do? What's the theme of the conflict? What can we expect during the tissue adaptation phases? And then the fourth biological law, which I also briefly mentioned, this is the law of microbes. So microbes are helpers, microbes are friends, and they operate in these germ layers to help to either break down tissue that was built up or help to restore tissue that's been lost. And so bacteria, the things that they call viruses. So this belongs in the red group. We all know by now, viruses do not cause disease. There is not a little particle hanging out on a doorknob trying to give you a cough. That's not how it works. This happens from inside. The things that are called viruses are simply adaptations taking place in the squamous epithelial tissue of the red group. So some type of conflict happened, and now the tissue is repairing. It's just protein particles present at the site where tissue has gone through a repair phase. And so we don't need to be afraid of bacteria or germs or things that are, coming from the microbial world. They're there to help. And if you can identify the conflict, you can figure it out. You don't need to be afraid and need to eradicate or eliminate or try to outsmart the bacteria. You work with them. You know that they're there to help you. And then the fifth biological.
This is a lot of what we've talked about. Sorry, I'm excited, but this is a lot about what we've been focused on in the past few years, because there was a time during COVID where everyone was like, oh no, we were afraid of each other. We were afraid of germs and viruses lurking on packages we picked up from the store. It was insanity. And now we know and understand better, yes, that there are ways in which we can shore ourselves up spiritually, emotionally, physically, and so forth, so that we can identify, like you said, maybe even identify if there's something that's making us susceptible to sickness in the first place. But it's funny that we do point to the helpers in the body as if they were the culprits. So this happens with cholesterol too, where we say, oh, the cholesterol is causing heart disease. What if cholesterol is more like coming to help because there's an issue in the heart, So I get that whole way of thinking. But Melissa, I'm curious, what do you say to the person who simply doesn't understand GNM, Germanic New Medicine, if they think, Uncle Jacob really got sick and died because, he was an alcoholic, or he just got a diagnosis of cancer and that's the way the ball bounces. Nothing else was involved. What do you say to people who have that paradigm?
Well, if someone believes that the universe is random and things just happen randomly, I'm not going to sit down and try to convince you that we live in a universe of laws of cause and effect, and that every effect, everything that happens had a cause. And so if this uncle, if he was an alcoholic, why was he drinking alcohol? What was he trying to not feel? So these conflicts. So is it the alcohol that causes the problem, or is the alcohol covering up the unresolved conflict? It's a way of coping with something that was hard to cope with. So that's leading to a conflict. And so the conflict is the thing that causes a cancer. It's the iron rule of cancer, the first biological law. A cancer does not occur without some type of reason. It's there, it's an adaptation. And so whether or not I'm not interested in sitting down and trying to convince a person of this, simply because it's laws of nature. It's like, okay, I'm going to convince you that when I drop this pen, it's going to fall to the ground. How many hours are you going to spend trying to convince someone that this is what happens? This is just what happens. That's how it is with the biological laws. This is just what happens. Dr. Hammer happened to be the guy who discovered that this is how it works, that in order for a cancer to appear in the body, some type of event had to occur that caught him off guard, that was shocking and acute, and he felt totally isolated. There's an impact in his brain. That's where the adaptation comes from. It's a law of nature. And so a person can recognize that, or they may not choose to recognize that. And that, one way or the other, if they want to be free, if they want to experience the empowerment of knowing that there is a reason, it's not now we can control and micromanage the body. No, it's now we can understand the laws of nature and operate more intelligently within those laws. And so this is, it's empirical. You can test all of this. You don't have to believe any of this. Just start observing. Like with me and the pimple situation, I just had to see. The next time I got a pimple, I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. The next time I got a sore throat, I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. The next time I talked to a friend and she had a UTI, it's like, we look it up. It's like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And Hilda, I tell you, every conversation I have with people all day long, it's like, well, that makes sense. Well, this makes sense. Well, this makes perfect sense. And it's always spot on. Yesterday, we had someone with heart palpitations. That made perfect sense. Someone with double vision, that made perfect sense. I mean, it's like when we hear the story, the biology is always perfectly expressing the conflict. And if we can pull the thread, ask the right questions, figure it out what it's about, the map is always correct. I mean, it's incredible what he is an absolute genius for putting this together and discovering, and it's absolutely criminal that not everyone knows about it. And so that's why, I take every chance I get on a podcast to tell the world, hey, check this out, because this information, everyone should know it. It should be in basic education for every child, every adult, every doctor. This also applies to animals. It applies to plants. Everything in nature responds to has adaptations in response to conflicting events. It's how we've survived up till this point. If we didn't have these adaptation programs, we wouldn't be here. The biology has to adapt in order to continue surviving. And when you can recognize it and resolve these conflicts sooner, this is the way to maintain health, is to not be in conflict for years at a time. It's the conflicts that go on for a very long time without resolution that can deplete the body, or a conflict that's active on and off and on and off and on and off for years and years and years. It's the time that we're in the conflict that's the problem, that creates something that, because people often ask me, well, what happens with a person, they get diagnosed with something and they die? Well, why does that happen? Well, they were in conflict for way too long, an unbiological amount of time. And nature is constantly having conflicts and resolving them. Conflict resolution. But when you live in the conflict for way too long, when your lifestyle, everything about modern society is counter to biology, children going to daycare, children being born in hospitals, all the things separate us from nature and increase the number of conflicts we have. So really, every time a person is dealing with something, and whether they don't make it through that adaptation process, even that makes sense when you understand the story.
Oh my gosh, this is so fascinating. Well, we will have obviously links in the show description so people can do a deeper dive. We've barely scratched the surface, Melissa, but I'm really thankful you got on the show. And I want to pose to you now the question I love to pose at the end. If the listener could only do one thing to improve their health, just take one step in the right direction, what would you recommend that they do?
Understand the fifth biological law, which is the one we haven't gotten to yet, which is the quintessence. It's understand that there is no evil in nature, that your body is not against you, that everything that happens in the body makes sense, that nature only does what is practical for continuing life. And so when you can look at the symptoms in your body through the lens of biology, say, how is this here? What type of survival program got activated within me? Get curious. Be curious about your experience. Don't assume that you already know and just brush it under the rug and not pay attention. Really just wonder. I wonder what this could tell me about my experience, about something that's unresolved in my life. This terrible stomach problem I have. Oh, what is indigestible to me? What can't I process? What can't I stomach? What can't I digest? Right? It's teaching you something. It's showing you something, and stay curious about that and dive further into these biological laws. They're not going anywhere. They've affected you your whole life without knowing it. If you could just get a glimpse into, okay, what does this say? Okay, I've got some hair loss. What is that from? Oh, a separation conflict. Oh, I'm dealing with cold sores. Oh, okay, so that's a separation conflict too. I'm dealing with I need to figure out, what is this telling me about my life?
Get curious. I love it. Melissa, on behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Our guest today was Dr. Melissa Sell. You can visit her website, drmelissasell.com, to learn more. And I am Hilda Labrada-Gore, the host and producer of this podcast, on behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the transcript for today's episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now for a recent review from Apple Podcasts. JGM said this: "My weekly favorite listen, packed with knowledge to keep me healthy and wise." JGM, thank you so much for your review. You too can leave us a rating and a review. Just go to Apple Podcasts, click on ratings and reviews, give us a bunch of stars, and tell people why they should listen. And thank you so much for listening, my friend. Stay well. And remember to keep your feet on the ground and your face to the sun.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.